education. Roll call first. Roll call please.
Mrs. Chapman?
Here.
Mr. Rapp?
Here.
Mrs. Ferris?
Here.
Mrs. Michael?
Here.
Mrs. Zerke?
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we move to public participation, I'd just like to very quickly say, I know some people are surprised that this meeting is at 9 o'clock in the morning when we usually have them on Mondays in the evening. But we've done this particular meeting this way at least the last 10 years since I've been on the board, because it's usually just an end-of-year financial wrap-up. So we try to do it as close to the end of the fiscal year as possible, which is June 30th, but that's a Sunday. And Fridays, the district is closed, therefore that's why it's today. And we have always done it early in the morning because we had board members that needed to go off to work afterwards. And actually, it's been scheduled for 7 a.m. since January, but our work circumstances on the board have changed, so we moved it a little bit later. So just wanted to let you know that's why we have it at this time on this day. Okay, public participation. Our first speaker is Deborah Thompson.
Speak very loudly.
Yes.
Good morning. We know you can do it. I'm a speech path, I hope so. But you know, it's a different situation here. Like my timer's going already, so here we go. Good morning. Thank you to the board for adding the release time for religious instruction policy to the agenda for discussion. It is crucial that the community has an understanding of this policy and its implications. As a retired educator, a parent of a Berea graduate, and a very active member of the church in the district, I see the need for a welcoming, diverse system that reflects our community. Originally designed for occasional family-oriented events such as holidays, the intent of this policy was not for group activities off campus. Primarily, this will disrupt the school day. Staff will be responsible for escorting young children from their respective classes to transportation and again when they return. Because of this additional responsibility, those staff will not be completing regular assigned tasks. The workload for teachers would increase for instruction and facilitating makeup work. What occurs if several groups request release time? As important, whatever group is involved in RTRI should be thoroughly vetted. Their history is important. Safety procedures, including background checks, driver and maintenance certifications, educational training, including how to accommodate children in IEPs and behavior management, and curriculum should be readily available and clearly stated. Educational standards should be maintained. When an organization gauges interest in the community, are they gathering signatures only in that community? Are they honest in their portrayal of their communications? Do they respect diverse perspectives? These and other questions need to be addressed for all families to make informed decisions. The board can review, change, or rescind the current policy. It is happening throughout the state of Ohio. This is a secular public school chosen by many for neutrality. There are numerous opportunities for faith formation outside the school day. This isn't about restricting religious freedom, but ensuring the rights of all children and families to receive uninterrupted education without coercion. I urge the board to carefully consider the integrity and impact of this policy on our district. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Deborah.
Chico Schwandresen.
Thank you. Thank you. Chico Vandresen.
Clearly, I'm used to that happening,
Yes.
so don't feel
I was
bad.
going to say Vandresen, so Vandresen. Thank you.
So I guess I don't need to introduce myself now. I'm also speaking about the RTRI program in the Berea City Schools. I am a Berea resident and a teacher in the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. And there's a lot of questions, and Ms. Thompson, is that correct? Just addressed many of them from an educator's perspective that I think that we need to have answered before we can move forward with programs like these, because they are going to be a burden on teachers, on the school staff, on the students who remain in class, and the students who are pulled out, and of course, on the taxpayers. And we need to have answers to these questions before we can move forward with a program like this. So where would the program be held? Who would handle the transportation, and who would bear the cost of that transportation? How will students leave the classroom, travel to an off-site location, learn a lesson, be transported back to the building, and then back to their classrooms, all within a single class period or their lunch and recess time? What kind of assurances are in place that the students won't be returned back to school late, therefore disrupting their learning and the learning of the students who remain in class? And if students are taken from their specials time, what sort of policy will be in place to make sure that they're making up that work, and will that burden fall on the teacher to be creating makeup work for them that they then have to do outside of class, and the teacher has to assess entirely outside of class? What are the credentials of the people providing transportation? What are the credentials of the people teaching? Will they have background checks? Who is supervising them and assuring the safety of the students? Who will be getting students from their classrooms to go to be signed out? Who is signing the students in and out? Who's getting the students back to their classrooms again when they return to school? As a teacher, I can guarantee you that it's disruptive to the classroom culture anytime a student is called to go down to the office and comes back in. And so it will be affecting not only the learning of the students in the room, or excuse me, the students being taken out of the room, it'll be affecting the learning of all of the students in the room, because any time that routine is disrupted, especially with our littlest students, it disrupts the class for quite some time, the whole class, not just the students that are being taken out. Regarding notification to parents, what information will they be given so that they can assess whether they want their students to participate? Like all people in our country, Christians can span the whole spectrum from very liberal to moderate to very conservative, saying that there will be Christian religious instruction, and I'll put that in quotes, does not give enough information for parents to make a decision. May I sum really quickly, and then I can give you the statement. I didn't have much left. Even without clear answers to these questions, I think it's clear that the RTRI program will put a burden on school staff, teachers, parents, transportation staff, and mostly on the students. It'll affect the learning, and until we fully understand the answers to all these questions, the policy to take students off-site shouldn't be put in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I hand this to you? All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Anna Jones.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Anna Jones. I'm a licensed independent social worker and an adjunct professor at Berea State University. I'm going to take a different approach. Okay. So why did I move to Berea? I moved to Berea because of the diversity here, a good school system. It had a small town feel in this community. Why did I convince my son and his family, with his child, to move to Berea to buy a home here? The same reason. Why am I pushing for my daughter to move to the city of Berea with her children? The same reasons. Diversity, schools, small town feel, community. But when I heard about this RTRI and the prospect of a certain organization, likewise, coming into the school system, I started to wonder, did I make a grave mistake? Did I miss something by bringing my family here into this community? And that hurts me. You see, Berea is special to me. It means something to me. It is a place where I feel safe. It is a place where I feel my family is safe. And not just safe from crime, but safe from exclusion, safe from othering, okay? It is a place where I can be me. It is a place where we see all types of flags flying. It is a place where we see signs that say Berea Con, okay? It is a place where adults and kids of all races and ethnicities and religions play and commune together. And all of this could be put in jeopardy if we allow organizations to come into our school system and use indoctrination inside of our school system. And I will tell you this, I do not use that word indoctrination lightly. According to the information and the research I have read about these organizations coming into the schools, this organization will be teaching a group of children a set of beliefs in a biased and uncritical manner. And this, indeed, is textbook indoctrination. These children would be taught biases. And so I want to know, how would this be beneficial to our community in the future? It isn't. Because it doesn't create kindness. Okay? What it creates is superiority. And that it is used to other and set aside those who do not fit. This is separation. This type of separation can lead to bullying. Religious bullying and trauma are real and does occur. These are some examples of bullying: ostracizing, calling people sinners, guilt, shame, telling people they're going to go to hell, repressing critical thought, and in some cases, parental alienation. When a child is told, if your parents do this or this, they are sinners, and they will alienate that parent. So for me, this is a deep concern because I have grandkids. And I don't want my grandkids to be put in a situation like this, because I believe Berea is a special place. And so I will end by saying this. This is a place, this is a slippery slope. And if we go this way, it could change our community. It could change how our children interact with each other, because it could cause separation and othering. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Colleen May.
Good morning, my name is Colleen May. My son Grayson will be a third grader here at Grindstone. We all probably know the issue at hand if we're here, so I'll begin. I, believe it or not, think the issue right now is not constitutional parental rights or upholding religious liberty. I'm a huge proponent for civil liberties and a personal freedoms advocate for choice, and want my child to learn about all the thousands of different religions and cultures outside of school hours. I won't speak about my personal opinions about the LifeWise Academy program in particular, but I will say that any religious organization program should not be facilitated during school hours, whether you opt in or don't. Release time religious instruction has been an option for years and should not be enabled by the Berea School District. Just a little background, House Bill 445, which is in review to change the current verbiage in the bill from may include to shall include release time, which is a separate and huge problem entirely in itself, would make this idea a requirement. But unless modified, the current non-required policy would entail this three-step criteria, basic. 1, parental permission is required. Great, that's a given. The parent decides what's best for their child. There's no dispute there. But these decisions will affect my child based on your preferences and ideologies. 2, the courses must take place off school property. That's wonderful, but non-participating students will be affected through no fault of their own, with disruptions to their classes resuming. And 3, they should be privately funded. Yes, but in actuality, school resources will be used if Berea allows this. What parameters and limits can we secure for any religious program then? Religious schools should not be mandating public school scheduling of any kind with hidden agendas blanketed by the false notion that parents can simply opt out, because it isn't that simple. Question, will non-participating students be affected by this program being carried out? Obviously the answer is yes. Other school districts that have already allowed it are seeing negative feedback and consequences for their students. Other local school districts like Medina this week have thankfully voted a policy against LifeWise Academy being allowed in their districts. Faculty, staff, and teacher involvement will be required to facilitate the students' departures and arrivals. This will inherently cause more work for teachers. and also scheduling conflicts for students that will need to make up work because of electives being missed. Non-participating students will encounter pressures that are unnecessary in a school day setting that can be avoided entirely. Other school districts that have allowed this have encountered current LifeWise students returning to school with bribery candy, prizes, and t-shirts to coerce and indoctrinate other students to join. It's a huge problem, and it will happen. LifeWise Academy in public school systems is being disguised as parental and civil liberty, and that any opposition is discriminatory, which is untrue. Religion is simply has no place during school hours in Berea public schools. Future test scores, disrupting the school day, scheduling of concerts and special elective program schedule conflicts, teachers dealing with non-present students having to make up work because of non-involvement. Current and future school funding will be affected. Current school resources being utilized, bullying and indoctrination of our children, undermining the public school system in general, and the overall safety of our children and students should be the main concern and priority. To the Berea Board of Education members, see the bigger picture, please, and say no to allowing LifeWise Academy to access our public schools for the future of our Berea school districts. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 more speakers, but our 15 minutes that we have allotted in our policy is up, so I would like to make a motion to extend to allow our final 2 speakers to speak.
So,
Could you do a quick roll call, please?
Mrs. Ferris?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mrs. Chapman?
Yes.
Mrs. Michael?
yes.
Mrs. Zerke?
Yes.
Okay, our next speaker is Eva, or Ava, Manny? Eva?
Hi, my name's Eva Manny. I have 4 kids, 2 of whom are at Grindstone and one's in the preschool program, and one will be in the preschool program. I would also like to say, concerning this release time for religious instruction, that I feel it would disrupt the students who are left in school. I also feel that it will make those students feel bad if they see their classmates going somewhere, getting to do something, and then coming back with prizes. I can say for my own kids, when it's been the Girl Scouts or the Cub Scouts in the school at recess, handing out prizes and stuff. The day the Girl Scouts did it, my daughter came home with a bracelet, really excited, and my son came home sad because the boys weren't allowed to have a bracelet because it was the Girl Scouts. And I feel the same thing will happen with this LifeWise group, that my family is mixed between, I'm an atheist and my husband is Orthodox Church in America, and so my kids have a mixed religious upbringing. They already kind of have a church school. If you want your kids to have religious instruction, there is so many options out there that's free, that's not during the school time. This is not needed, doesn't really serve anybody. Anyone who wants their kids to have religious instruction already has it. It just will make kids who aren't participating feel bad. The kids that will go to this are kids that already have church options for them, and they're just going to come back and make my kids, who aren't evangelical Protestants, feel bad about what we're raising them to be, which is critical thinkers with a base in this history and tradition of a religion that isn't included in this. And it's not just us, it's people who are Catholics, people who are Muslim, people who are Hindu, or other religions are also going to feel like if their kids do not participate in this, they're going to get bullied and they're going to get othered, as you said, for not being evangelical Protestants. And it's bad enough to have the Girl Scouts and the Scouts do it in a way that is, at least has kind of always been the case, and is only once in the school year, but this is going on every week. And every week a kid's going to come home and say, why don't I get to go do this? Not to mention when they're gone in the classroom, you can't tell me you can get a bunch of kids gathered, shipped somewhere else, and back in 45 minutes. So they're going to be missing class time, and the teachers are going to be holding everybody else back so that these kids who are going don't fall behind. Okay. So I would say vote no. As it is, my family's considered using the policy to take the kids out on St. Nicholas Day or for Pascha, which is Easter, which usually falls at a different time. As it is, it allows parents to already have those accommodations they need. You don't need an organized group to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Matt Petras.
Good morning, Matt Peaches from the middle school. I'm here to talk about, at the last board meeting, at the end, you had a discussion about eliminating the DFT from the agenda. And I just want to feel that it was a rushed decision. And some of the reasons behind that is It all started with Bill Boone at the high school doing shout-outs for the high school. And I saw that and said, we can't leave the middle school out here. So decided to do the same thing. And the 3-minute time limit that, came up felt kind of rushed because the whole goal behind it is to promote the teachers, the staff, how wonderful the students are, the clubs that we have there, how terrific the administrators are, what Mrs. Wheeler does for us, what Mr. Draves does, recognize Mr. Mack when he came for the junior achievement. It's just to show the positives that occur there and everything. And if, you look at all the minutes that have gone by when we've presented, it just strictly says, Bill Boone, shout-outs for high school staff and students. Matt Petras, middle school shout-out staff. Brian Kessler, high school, middle school shout-outs for staff and students. During your discussion, I appreciate the discussion you had. It seemed the majority of you enjoyed that, But you have a member here that has a legal background that a lot of us do not have, and she's an expert in that. And so during your discussion, you kind of felt that it was good what we had, but based on her scenario and her suggestion, it was to eliminate, and you have to kind of go with the expert that's a part of it there. I appreciate that. I've negotiated the last 8 or 9 contracts. Never once has a BFT come to a board meeting to discuss anything that goes on in negotiation. We know it's up to the superintendent to, let you guys know what's going on, what we've agreed to, and so forth, because ultimately it's your decision about whether or not it passes or not. But I will say your scenario, based on the way it was set up, you're definitely right, it could happen. I would not be the one to come to a board meeting to share anything negative that's going on during negotiations, but somebody could, the way it was set up in that open area, that could occur. And so I can see and understand your reasoning behind that. I think I'm always looking for the positive in a win-win situation. And I think there's a win-win here where we can still have the VFT do the shout-outs for staff, students, what goes on their building, without worrying about other things coming out that don't need to be discussed at an open forum. And so if you were to just rename it VFT shout-outs, and with the idea that all it is shout-outs, and that's what we've done every time here, I think that it would be a win-win for everybody because you could hear what goes on in the buildings, the positivity that goes on, and we can share that information with you. And so I would just hope, in the next month or two before September that you might have a discussion and rethink and just allow the BFT to still present the shout-outs with the understanding that it's strictly a shout-out. That's all we've done, and I think that's all we would continue to do. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Very soon in the agenda, we will be having discussion about what 6 of the 7 speakers spoke about. So just hang tight for a few minutes and we will go to that. Hopefully many of your questions will be answered. Okay, treasurer's update.
Tonight, thank you for coming this morning. This is on the agenda. This is the year-end financial meeting. We have to approve final appropriations and temporary appropriations for next fiscal year so we can get started on July 1, moving forward with the next fiscal year. This fiscal year ended up right about where I thought it was, right where the forecast had our numbers. We had a couple transfer or advances that had to be made at year end to clear up some accounts. Those will be advanced back in July, so everything will be fine. Appropriations for next year, the total appropriations are around $220 million. The total revenue for next year, all funds, is $235 million. Just to put that in perspective, appropriations are up for next year mainly because of our health insurance consortium. We've added this year 3 new districts are coming into our health insurance consortium to make 10. So that alone is about 100 million. So just the consortium itself, you think managing all the claims and stuff. So that is why appropriations are up slightly from what they were last year, is adding those new districts. Again, everything ran fine this year, and it's closely matching what the forecast had. And those advances will be made back in July. We'll approve the advances to come back into the general fund. So I just, again, thank you for coming this morning to approve these. I also wanted to note there's a donation on the agenda from the Education Foundation. They've agreed to donate some money to us because of their interest earnings. And these are for, we are putting equates to $3,000 worth of material supplies to create common corners in all of our elementary classrooms. So, we're going to be putting out order in actually July 2. Yeah, so we do want to thank the Education Foundation for all their help and support. That's a great thing.
It's recommended that items C3 to C8 be approved as part of the consent agenda unless a Board of Education member wishes to have an item removed.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferris?
Yes.
Mrs. Chapman?
Yes.
Mrs. Michael?
Yes.
Mrs. Zerke?
Yes.
Okay. Next item is discussion on the release time for religious instruction policy, number 5223. Mrs. Wheeler, can you give us, you provided us with this very excellent summary, so can you just give us an overview of where we are and how we got here?
Yeah, so, it felt like, and again, several emails, I think I received several emails from people who are in the room today, so I've taken a lot of information from trying to answer emails and still get responses of why people don't want this to happen. I think it's important to really give the why we almost have to let it happen. So just kind of a history, and I know Vicki's put it up there, is, and I kind of just went back from when this all started coming about with the history background of release time for religious education. I pulled a memo that we had gotten from the Attorney General. And again, just a couple, 2 bullet points. I want to specifically in 2013, Ohio Revised Code 3313.6022 was passed. And it detailed the rules that they had to follow for any outside sponsor, anything regarding release time for religious education. I think it's important to note, the Berea City School District Board of Education adopted the policy for release time for religious education back in 2015. Obviously, I wasn't here, most of the board wasn't here. I'm assuming it was adopted in response to the passage of law of the Ohio Revised Code. It was revised in November of 2016, and that is our current policy today. And so I actually pulled what the original policy was in 2015, so I wasn't here, to see what it was, to see what it is now. And it was just release time, I don't have it with me, whatever it was. But it was pretty much same policy, but the new policy that was revised specifically matched the provisions of Ohio Revised Code. So if you talk about House Bill 445, really House Bill 445 does not pertain to us because we already have board policy. So House Bill 445, if passed, just simply states if a school district does not have board policy around release time for religious education, that they must adopt policy around release time for religious education. So it really doesn't apply to us now because we have a policy that was adopted in 2015, revised in 2016. I was going to say one more thing about that. So the board knows, I have obviously talked with legal counsel, and within our state superintendent's organizations. Everything we hear and understand about House Bill 445, even if the board decides to rescind current policy, that bill is going to pass and that the governor will not veto it. And I say to people who have concerns and issues about that, you have rights as citizens to reach out to your legislators and the lawmakers to voice your concerns about that. That's where we are right now with House Bill 45 and with us pertaining to, we already have board policy. I think it's really important, and a lot of the concerns that were addressed today, and I'm going to try to address those as best I can. Any outside religious organization who has, I should say this, anybody who's providing religious education outside of the district has to follow and abide by these provisions. So example one, someone spoke today to say, well, if the kids aren't back on time, whatever it is, well then they can't be released by the law. So we have to adhere to the provisions of the law, which state parent guardian has to give written consent. The entity maintains attendance records and makes them available to the school district. Transportation to and from the place of instruction, including transportation for students with disabilities, is the complete responsibility of the sponsoring entity, parent, guardian, or student. The sponsoring entity makes provisions for and assumes liability for the student. No public funds are expended and no public school personnel involved in providing religious education. The student assumes responsibility for any missed school work, and no student may be released from a core curriculum subject course to attend a religious instruction course. And for us, if anybody, whether it's a complete organization, it's an existing faith-based church in the district or community right now, as long as they abide by these things, by our policy, we permit students the release time for that religious education. So I think what's most important is to talk about the misinformation that's out there. And again, I call it misinformation because I want to actually try to be able to provide people with facts. So that, and I've tried to do that in the few people who've reached out to me via email. And again, I understand. But I just want to try to give you facts from our perspective of the information and the whys. And a couple of people today had some valid why questions. So I think the first one is, the information is out there that by us allowing an outside sponsor into, and I put that in there, into our schools, goes against the separation of church and state. And we as an organization are not allowing any outside organization into our schools. No outside religious sponsor would be practicing religion in our schools. Any outside religious sponsor providing religious education is coming into the community. They're coming into the community. They are not coming into our schools. And I think that's important to understand. Another piece of information is that we are giving outside sponsors access to our students. So we don't give anybody access to our students. And in order for a student to participate in any religious instruction or any kind of event, a parent consent has to be given to release a student from school. Another piece of misinformation, that BCSD should be responsible for background checks on the staff members who work for the outside religious sponsor. And for us, slippery slope, because the outside organization sponsor is not affiliated with the Berea City Schools. We have no authority or any right to conduct background checks. And if parents are concerned about this, they're the ones who need to direct those concerns to that outside religious sponsor. Another piece is the board and the community should have a right to vote on who can and cannot provide religious instruction. And I will say, as superintendent, and I think the board also would agree, that we will follow Ohio law and board policy for the right of release time for religious education. This is not a matter upon which the Board of Education takes a vote. The Board of Education has voted on policy. So that would be what the board votes on, not on LifeWise or any other outside religious organization. And again, I strongly urge that the community members who have issues with Ohio law and with potential passage of the House bill, that they reach out to their lawmakers to voice their concerns. Misinformation is that we have a right to disqualify an outside religious sponsor from being in our schools. And again, I emphasize no outside religious sponsor will be physically in our schools for the purpose of religious education. And BCSD does not and cannot vet outside religious sponsors. The vetting process is the responsibility of a parent. BCSD should ask questions of the outside religious sponsor as to whether or not their bus drivers have CDLs, and request information about whether transportation vehicles are maintained properly. And again, this goes back to similar with the background checks. It is not the responsibility of the district to request or oversee their transportation. Again, I mean, I feel like I'm being redundant, but that is the responsibility of the parent to request that information if they are concerned about that. That BCS tax dollars will be used for staff to provide information about missing assignments for any student who's released for religious education. And that this is a fact. At any time, if any student leaves our buildings, our staff is always responsible for communicating missing work or assignments for any student who is absent from school for any reason. We have the responsibility to do that. So it would be no different from any other student who leaves schools for the purpose of religious education. A reminder that one of the provisions of the law, no student may be released from a core curriculum subject course to attend religious instruction course. And last piece that I have on here is that BCSD is responsible to review and approve the curriculum for an outside religious sponsor. And again, because they are not affiliated with the school district or approved by BCSD, we have no obligation, nor do we have a requirement to vet or approve their curriculum. And again, I said again, that is the responsibility of the parent to request the information if they are concerned about that. So I just want to stop there. If you don't go to that piece of it yet, I just want to stop there to see if the board has any questions. I think, I will say, I don't disagree that there would potentially be a little more disruption, right? But we don't have a choice about that. If the law is the law, we don't have a choice in that. And I will say,
Yes, we did. Yes. Medina did it, we can do it.
I'm going to comment on to you about Medina. Medina currently does not have board policy. So that is why Medina right now. So Medina is not choosing to adopt board policy to allow release time for religious education. So I already looked into that. We have that policy. So again, I need people to be here. Based on the law and based on the current policy that we have, this is what has to happen.
No, it doesn't.
So
It does
It
not.
does not.
It does not.
we are not going to address the,
So I have a concern, just as a special teacher, as an art teacher, when we're saying they're not being released from core curriculum. So how often is this happening? Because,
so can I answer that in a second, Katie?
Yeah.
So just these questions first, because I'm going to go into my conversation with LifeWise.
okay,
Okay, so can I ask you to hold on that? And then
Yeah.
after I go over that, I will explain that.
okay.
Okay? But anything else about this?
Thank you for putting this together. This is the whole, you know.
I just want the facts to be out there.
Yeah.
And I understand frustration and concern. I'm not dismissing any of that. But my job and your job is to pay attention to the facts and the law. So for right now, everything as it is, on the table as it is, anybody, any student, I will tell you, we have students right now who sign out in the course of a day for religious education, whether it's for prayer, whether it's to attend something. And again, it's a kid by kid faith. We have this happening right now in our schools. And so as long as none of those provisions of the law are being violated, a student, a parent has the right to pull their child out of school to get religious education. The best of my knowledge, this is the first time that there is there's an organization doing it. But this has happened in the past. It just happened this year. So it does happen currently. Okay. All right, so I will touch base on my communication with LifeWise. So LifeWise, I was first made aware of, I think, by board members that LifeWise was holding again, in the community, not in our schools, a meeting about potentially, bringing LifeWise religious education somewhere in the Berea City schools. So they reached out to me for a meeting, which I have meetings with all kinds of people all the time, and I met with them on April 24th. I'm giving facts of information that they shared with me. So what they shared at that time was they had secured a possible location in the community, and that's Trinity Church. That they were going to seek kids from They're going to focus on Big Creek Elementary School due to the location. They shared with us possible schedules for the release time, and we made it very clear to them, we will not change what we do in our scheduling and in our operations to meet a schedule request on their end. We will do school as we always do school, and if there is a request for time, it will not change what we do in our current practices. It will not change it. At that time, they still had not hired a director. They indicated that they still did not have funding for transportation. Again, I'm not asking, this is just information that's being given to me. They asked me for a letter that would include confirmation that we acknowledge, that we reviewed and we acknowledged their plan, of which I would not provide. Because I need to say, I am not, this has nothing to do with LifeWise for me. This has everything to do with a parent and a parent's right to choose if they want their child to do this. So I wanted to make it very clear that I'm not giving anybody permission to come into our district. Right now, by our policy, our families have the right to choose to withdraw, to take their child out of school for religious education. So I need to make that very clear. I have not given anyone permission to do this. I sit back, listen, and what I say is, for our policy, parents have the right to take their child out of school. So my email to us in response to your request, please know that we recognize that LifeWise Academy will be providing religious education off school property during the school day, while neither encouraging nor discouraging participation by Berea students. We are prepared to coordinate logistical matters for student release in accordance with the law and board policy. At that time, they kind of asked like, well, if we get this up and going, if we have students, we want somebody that we can coordinate within your building. We said, absolutely not. The only people that we will coordinate and communicate with is our parents, because again, that's who the person, those are the only people that we're going to work with is our parents. We are not working with LifeWise. And again, we indicated that we would not work directly with LifeWise, but rather with the parents who are giving permission for the children who are requesting release time for education. Again, whether it's LifeWise, whether it's another church, or whether it's another entity that is providing religious education, we would do that with anyone. So we did indicate in that meeting that we don't like the idea of our students missing any part, so Katie, I think I'm going to answer your question. We don't like that they're going to miss any part of our school day, any part of it. They're allowed up to an hour of time. Wait, is it an hour or 45 minutes? Or an hour of time. And what we have said, and again, we ask those same questions, how do you expect to get a child out of school? Like, from the time they leave class to whether it's get on a bus or to walk or whatever it is, and to get into your place, like, it's 30 minutes. Like, what's the point? I mean, we've said that. And that's why I'm being totally transparent in that, because we're like this. Why don't you do it outside of school hours, right? We say there are other, I think you made the point, there are other churches and religions and whatever that do it outside of school hours. Why not? There's really no answer, because they can't, right? Because anybody can do it by the law. By law, they're allowed to do it, and they're allowed to do it during school hours. We feel, right, in the core classes, math, science, reading, and social studies, right? Those are the 4 core classes that they're identifying, and that's what the law identifies as the 4 classes. So to your example, we told them, we feel that, so really the only time that they can take a student out of school is lunch, recess, and a specialist class. And we believe, again, we have lunch, we have recess, we have specials, because we feel that that is a part of a holistic education for a child, right? So we don't love the idea of it, right? But again, by law, that's the only way a child can be pulled out of school for religious instruction is during that time period. So we let that be known, but it doesn't matter, because as long as it is within the law, they're allowed to do it and do it. Go ahead, Ina.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, so I teach elementary school. I have a similar schedule to what our elementary schools have. And so I see my students about 9 or 10 times a quarter.
Yes.
And so if these kids, if they're getting pulled from their specials classes once a week, they're gonna be missing like a big chunk of the trimester.
Don't disagree with you.
So how is that gonna work? I'm wondering if there's a way that we could at least do something for like the amount of times they could be pulled or something, because I just don't see how that's not gonna put extra work for the teacher to have to do something to change for those students that are leaving their class for like a huge chunk of time.
I don't disagree with you, and I don't know. So here's the one thing, then again, I need to emphasize, we're not changing what we do. We're not going to, we can't do it, we're not gonna change what we do. And again, this would be the question I believe that a parent should ask, right? And again, it's a parent's choice, Katie, at the end of the day, it's a parent's choice. So I believe that if you're a parent and you're taking your child out for that hour on a Monday, the one thing, and again, I know that, I think what caused a lot of this stir too was the information that LifeWise has put on their site that they've got school district approval. Again, I need to emphasize, they did not get school district approval. Did they meet with me? Yes. Did they get approval? No. At that time, because that was, I will tell you, a schedule that was presented to us was another school district who actually created a schedule, and within the schedule, LifeWise is one of the specials options, at which I have indicated, like, that is not an option in our school district. We will not do that, because LifeWise is not a special for us. Whether it's LifeWise or whether it's religious education, right? So I know we keep using the word LifeWise, but if it's anybody that wants to provide religious education, I'm like, again, that doesn't belong in our schools, so we are not doing that as part of our school day. So
I think that that sample schedule that might have been shown, that's a different community. That is a
100%.
different,
Yep.
perhaps a different set of priorities
Yeah.
in a different community.
Yeah.
And when I think about Berea, I think about how much we value those specials.
Yeah.
You know, our music program, our art program, that we're known for our strength and our commitment to that part of the development of our children. And I almost want to say that, you know, maybe these organizations have found success in other communities. Perhaps they won't find success here because of who we are and what we put as a priority. And I'm not saying that, you know, religion is not a priority for the people of the Berea district. That's, you know, that's not fair to say, but that, you know, perhaps we can make accommodations outside of the school time for religion to be a priority, and that our community respects the time that our children are in our buildings.
Can you tell me where it says what the core curriculum is listed? Because I have not found that anywhere where it lists just those 4 subjects. And I know Toledo board recently amended their policy.
To say what?
To say, Toledo Public Schools deems all courses to be core curricular, including but not limited to courses that are state mandated curriculum, which would
But
limit
they put that in their policy.
Yes,
So,
right. Well, I'm just saying, they made that change, so that,
I think
so that limits it to basically lunchtime,
lunch or recess.
lunch and recess.
Correct.
And at that point, it's a parent's choice if they want to take their kid out during lunch and recess.
Yes, potentially.
And they're not missing every
Everything
class.
that we have got, so that's the first I've heard that.
It just happened like yesterday.
That's the first I've heard the school board has done that. So that would be a change in a revision to the policy, which again, we have to, you know, that's a consult legal counsel to
Right.
see where does that,
But does it say anywhere what the core did the state define
Yeah.
core curriculum?
I would
Because I have not
say
seen it
yes
anywhere.
somewhere, but I can follow up on that.
Because, I mean,
to
I've looked
see.
back to when the original law was passed and everything, and
Or
I
I'm
did
sure
not
it's
see.
defined somewhere with an asterisk.
Probably,
at the bottom of the-
Or is it up
somewhere.
to each entity to define what our
Well-
corporate, what we consider to be our
Yeah,
corporate
well, it looks
law?
like they just did it there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, all of this information that you presented us is based on current board policy and current law.
Yeah.
However, that, you know, with consultation with legal counsel, can be amended as the board sees fit, as long as it follows the law.
I'm good with yes, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so, do you have anything else, or can we just discuss now?
No, I think I pretty much covered everything. Again, I feel it's important that we focus on, the focus is on what we have in place right now. And so I am not supporting any, nor do I believe that the district is supporting. So if we say that, do we have to look at every single child when they leave for religious education to determine, and we can't do that. We can't have that lens of we're gonna pick and choose who a child can go to receive their religious education. That's out of our lane. We're out of our lane if we do that. We just have to follow policy and we have to follow law. And everything that we've done right now we've adhered to both.
Absolutely, and we appreciate you putting all this information in for us, because it's much easier to understand through current policy and current law.
Right.
So, when we first got wind of the group coming in to the community and seeing if they could get their ducks in a row, I was at that kickoff meeting in April, or I'm sorry, March, and there were some questions that were asked that kind of addressed some of the concerns, and between that and, you know, and I guess I'm trying to address some of the concerns that the people here at the meeting have expressed, and I know I've seen it online. It really is, there are answers out there, and that those questions have to be asked of the organizations. And it's unsettling, and I'm with Tracy that, you know, I would prefer if our kids stayed with us the whole time. And I you know, wish that this stuff could be, that this instruction could be handled outside of school hours. But it is just, it's the prerogative of the parent to do it. And I encourage anybody who is interested in pursuing that to reach out to whoever that sponsor is and ask the hard questions. But in the meantime, I do feel that our hands are a little tied, although I am intrigued with the Toledo case. So I would be interested in looking into that a little further about defining, if we have the ability to define what core is.
I agree with that.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I would also encourage folks to, you know, I think this is the worst of gerrymandering, where the result of gerrymandering.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And evangelical churches kind of flexing a muscle of power that they perhaps didn't do in the past. And I think it's incumbent upon everyone to contact their legislators, state legislatures, and legislators, and get involved on a grassroots level to spread good information, accurate information, and maintain what we have had here in Berea, and the independence of sorts.
And to vote accordingly in November. And, you know, things are the way they are because of the way they are.
I think we look at the Toledo thing, if we can investigate that.
I mean, that's interesting. That's the first I've heard anybody defining it that way, so.
So everybody's in accordance with getting some legal counsel on that language and what our parameters are from there.
Yes,
Would
absolutely.
you like to do that, or do you want me to reach out?
How about we do a call together?
Okay.
Also, I mean, wherever that takes us, besides rescinding the policy, I would like to invite Lifewise to come and give a presentation to the board. I know when we were at that meeting in March, they said that they had done that for other school districts, and I believe it gives us the opportunity to ask questions, many of the logistical type things that people are asking here. Rather than having, however many parents want to do that, they can come and listen to it for themselves.
I oppose to bringing them in, I would disagree with that. I don't want to give them a platform.
Would that, if it was at a board thing, would it allow participation, or would it be just speaking? It seems like
It
people
would
would
just
want
be
a question and answer thing, and so perhaps we have
I
PTA
just-
or something.
I think that goes back to vetting. I think that goes, again, so if you bring, again, if you bring Lifeway, if we bring every religious organization in who's providing religious education, because at the end of the day, we have no say over who it is and where parents go for their religious education.
I understand that, but I also feel that it is our responsibility, if the children are members of our community and our school district, that we have the answers to the questions that we want answered.
I think I tried to answer those today.
Yes, but there's a lot of things that are still unknown that probably they're the only ones that can answer.
I think it's incumbent upon parents to ask these questions if they want their children to be part of the Lifewise program. When I look at the law that we're talking about here, there's a provision in the law that says specifically that a school district member of a school district board of education or school district employee is not liable in damages in a civil action for injury allegedly arising during a student's transportation to or from, while they're with these organizations. We don't, under this law, we don't have any liability for when students go. And I think that to ask questions, some of these questions that are more appropriate for parents to be asking, I think it gives the impression that we do have some responsibility for them once they leave, and we don't. Well, and I think that the Lifewise has a responsibility to present themselves. We do not, I don't think we need to, again, give them the stage. They have the ability, they're in the community, they're a church community, they can advertise amongst themselves, they can have their own event where they're answering questions. People in those churches can request, if they have questions, for them to have put on a presentation. Step 9 is to execute the plan. I would imagine part of executing the plan would be a public relations kind of community draw to get kids to sign up for it. So I would think that there are going to be opportunities for parents, if they're interested in learning more. They can learn it directly from them. They don't need to learn it from us.
How many people were at the meeting that you were at?
20.
Like, were they parents? Or
I don't recognize them.
Mostly older, maybe grandchildren in the district.
That was the one thing that I had indicated. They're not through the process yet, and this is just what, but from the best of my understanding is they have not gotten their funding to be able to do this. So, and I know that I've had a couple of different religious organizations reach out to me, asking me like what I know about it, and then that they reached out to other religious organizations to try to garner their financial support for it, and they're not supporting them right now. So at this point, don't even know if it's going to happen.
Okay, so we'll move to the next step of finding out some more information on how we can revise our policy, and we'll discuss it more in our July 8th, I think it is. July 8th meeting.
Yep.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you all for coming and sharing your concerns and hearing ours as well.
Okay.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions, call me directly. I will entertain a phone call, a conversation. I know I have a couple emails in here from some people that, and just the back and forth in an email is really, really hard. I will welcome a sit-down conversation at any time, because I think it's just healthier, but it's also, I can get into, I think hopefully this document today provided most of that, but please, and anybody, call me, set up an appointment. I have no problem sitting down and talking to people about this.
Can we make this document available?
I'm going to actually now attach it to the board meeting, and probably anybody who responds to me, I'm just going to attach that as a document.
Okay. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but don't feel embarrassed if you want to leave.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is continued discussion on added language to the board member handbook. So last meeting, we talked about everything, and we were in agreement about everything, except we wanted to do revise some language about legal counsel.
In my personal opinion, looking at the verbiage and looking at the legal counsel's response, John, and basing it somewhat on what we did here, but with the last discussion on Federation, while I love having Federation there, we deferred to his counsel to say, okay, we recommend against this. I am a firm believer that just adding, that we should not add language for that first part. He's saying that his response to this was basically that what we were doing was fine, and that he doesn't necessarily see a need for it. I just think it runs the risk of inverting the flow chart as far as us and the superintendent. Nothing negative implied, but I think it risks inverting that and almost ties the hands of whoever would be president now in the future. And I feel that's not the path that we need to go. I think there have been some good, healthy discussions in regard to it, and I think that awareness of possible duplication of services will guide future calls and discussions, but I don't think written stuff is necessary at this point in time.
Keeping in mind that this is just a handbook, it's just a set of guidelines, it's not policy, it's not, I want to say it's not written in stone, but it's a guideline, it's a guide for kind of like, somebody coming into the role of the president, I'm not quite sure, when should I and shouldn't I, or do I need to contact counsel? The document that was shared with the group as far as the billing link for, and the showing of the duplicate times that that council was contacted either by the president and the superintendent, indicates there is obviously a lack of communication between, perhaps we're jumping too quickly to call the billable guy. And it's probably not a bad idea. I know that our council kind of said, most districts don't have that in place, but it doesn't hurt to kind of have an idea of how to handle concerns. The language, how this language is written is like kind of overwhelming. It's a little hard to understand. Basically what we're asking is that when something arises, when a question arises, that the first thing we do is that perhaps communicate with Tracy and say, hey Tracy, I heard, or I'm concerned about, and see if Tracy has the answer, either Tracy or Jill. if they have the answer, then we don't have to go to council, and we don't have to necessarily, we don't have to rack up a bill for that. If Tracy doesn't know, then maybe that's a good opportunity, that would be then a good opportunity to go to council. It's about trying to make sure that we are using council appropriately, that we are using the knowledge that we have in-house of our treasurer and our superintendent. And, I think that it's great to have a great definitive answer, but sometimes those answers are available to us. And there may be times when going to the superintendent or the treasurer may not be appropriate because it concerns them, and that's fine. Those would be opportunities where, we would just go to council. But it's also important that the board as a whole be aware of, if it's worthy of going to council, then it's worthy that we, as a group, know that it's a concern. And, that hasn't been happening either. So the guidelines are good. The guidelines would put us, give us kind of a playbook on how to address concerns amongst ourselves.
I disagree with that the board has not been notified when board council was called, by me in particular. It might not have been before, but it was certainly after, in a summary of conversations. So I don't think that's a fair thing to say. And, our council is our board council. So it's sometimes she's looking, the superintendent, not necessarily Tracy, is looking for something different than the board might be looking for.
But you should ask her first. Perhaps she knows the answer.
I understand that, but I don't think that the board president's hands should be tied with language that our own council is saying is not necessary.
Well, I understand that council generally, in vast majority of the communications that council has, it's with the superintendent for any district. So our situation is unusual in the fact that council is frequently talking to the president.
That's not a fair statement either. It is not frequently.
It seemed like in the email we received that he pretty much stated that it's usually the board president and the superintendent, and that this, having this in the board handbook was unnecessary, and that most boards don't have anything like that. And there was no reason to have anything like that.
But they also said that usually it's unusual for the board president to be reaching out on so many matters that it's
He
more
did
of a-
not use those words.
He didn't use those words.
He did not say
But he said it's
unusual.
usually
And he also
just
said that it was,
usually just at evaluation.
no,
time.
he also just said that it wasn't being abused. Therefore, he sees no reason for a policy or for language.
One of the other issues is that because the board is not a party to the conversation that happens between the president and council, we don't know the question that is posed. We only know the information that comes back. And I'm not saying that is itself an issue, but, the advice that you get is only as good as the question that you ask.
True.
And so we don't know exactly what was communicated. I know that the frequency with which council is consulted is, I think it's a lot. And I think that because there have been concerns, looking at the very first paragraph, we haven't in the past had conversations about the implication of attorney-client privilege. And that is not addressed anywhere else in the handbook. And to Corey's point, providing some guidance to future boards, making them aware that this is an issue, that when there's a conversation with council and that privilege belongs to the entire board. I think it's just important for boards to understand that the relationship with council is a relationship between the board and council. And it's not a personal, it's not the president's personal counsel. And I know that you agree with that. And so that's why I think that having some guidance for boards, for future boards, is important. I think that this relationship is important, and the issue of privilege is important. And so it's just appropriate to address it. I don't think that it ties the president's hands in any way. And to Rick's point, that we have had good and productive conversations, I appreciate very much that you and Mrs. Wheeler will be reaching out together to talk to council about how we might define our core curriculum. I think that's the model that we want and that makes sense, so that the two of you have the same information at the same time. And it cuts down on the duplication. So anyway, I don't think that this language is harmful. I think it's helpful going forward.
I mean, I agree with what Rick said, though. If we're gonna go with, when the majority of us were okay with having the DFT on the agenda and agreed to take it off based on what legal counsel said, if we're gonna go with what they said on that, and I think that we should go with what was also stated in the email, that there's no reason to add language that we don't need this in the handbook. It seemed like he was very, almost like baffled, like there's no districts that are doing this. Like, I don't know why you need to have this in your handbook. So I don't know why we would take what he's saying in one instance and say, okay, we need to take the BFT off the agenda, but then in another instance say we need to add this to the handbook when we don't really need to add it to the handbook.
Well, and that goes to my point, that, and I agree with you that he did seem baffled in his email. I don't know what was communicated to him. And
The only thing that was communicated to him was the language that was presented, because no one consulted him ahead of time. That was it. So there was no conversation, there was, this language has been presented, what do you think about it?
But I think before we
there's
add,
no context.
that language, if we want to use perhaps the next 8 to 12 months as some data gathering to see the usage, legal usage, or the checking with legal counsel for the next year, to see as a more finite, now that these discussions have been here and in the open, to gather that data and see, is there a massive duplication that would be continuing? And if so, if we feel it's a problem at that point. But I think it's something that, at this point in time, I just can't be in favor of adding that language.
Well, and I think, though, that this language isn't intended to rein anybody in. It is to provide guidance to the board and to future boards. And so I don't think that there's harm here. This language was prepared by council for us to use.
This version was,
Yeah,
not the first.
right, no, this is the language that's been proposed, that he approves.
So where are we? We need a motion to do something.
I motion we accept the language for the revision of the board member handbook as presented.
Second. Okay, any more discussion before we vote? Okay, roll call please.
Mrs. Ferris?
Yes.
Mrs. Zerke?
Yes.
Mrs. Chapman?
No.
Mr. Mack?
No?
Mrs. Michael?
No.
Okay, that was actually number 3 on here. But I think we should bring this back though for the next meeting to approve those other things separately. That had nothing to do with that we already had discussion about at our last meeting. The other revisions.
Well, I think it's all part of the,
There were other things that were added that we discussed at our last meeting, but if we just voted against it, that means that everything was voted against. So we'll just put it back up on the next agenda without that. Okay. It's recommended the Board of Education move into executive session for the purpose of the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of an employee or official.
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mrs. Zerke?
yes.
Mrs. Chapman?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferris?
Yes.
Mrs. Michael?
Yes.